We're so excited to welcome a very special guest today, someone who has spent his career working to make our community stronger and ensure every child has the chance to thrive. Governor Bob Ferguson is a fourth-generation Washingtonian, the son of a public school teacher and a Boeing employee, and a passionate advocate for education, equity, and families across our state. He's also a proud husband to Colleen and dad to teenage twins, Jack and Katie. As governor, he's been a strong supporter of early learning programs that help kids build the confidence and skills they need to become lifelong readers, work that's right at the heart of Page Ahead's mission. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Governor Bob Ferguson.
Thank you so much, Brian, and thanks to all of you for being here. Any lunch that is focused on two of my favorite topics, kids and books, has to be a successful lunch in my book. So I appreciate it so much. And Arden, where are you sitting, by the way? Thanks. So just this is not the focus of my remarks, but you mentioned the federal government and some things that are happening on federal cuts. So I will just take one moment before I share some personal thoughts. The challenges we have with the federal government are profound, and the funding is a key part of it. So just so folks know, about 27% of our state budget comes from the federal government. That can be public health, that could be K through 12 education, that can be really important programs, AmeriCorps, you name it. And so I just want all of you to know, because you mentioned something that is so critical, that the state is very involved in monitoring that, and we have filed many lawsuits challenging the withholding of federal funds, by the way, all successful so far, right, to protect Washington. So I just want you all to know that there are a lot of folks who are working very, very hard in my office, the Office of the Attorney General, to really stand up for that and to make sure that we're taking care of our kids and our entire state. So thanks for mentioning that. I appreciate it. And really, two words would really summarize my remarks today, and those two words would be thank you. Thank you to all of you for supporting this really wonderful organization that does so much for kids all across our state, particularly low-income and underserved kids. I was asked to share a few personal perspectives about reading and kids, and fair warning, it really is one of my favorite subjects. But I promise to be brief. So I'll maybe share a few thoughts first as a kid, what my life was like as a kid, similar to your experience, I think, Arden, but also as a dad, which is my new role now. And so first, just quick background: I'm one of 7 kids. I grew up just a short distance from here. 7 kids, it's 6 boys, 1 long-suffering sister in our family of 7. So the 7 of us certainly won the parent lottery, in our lives. We won the parent lottery. My mom and dad were deeply involved, with all of their kids, and for sure for my father, in particular for a man of his generation. I was born in 1965. He was deeply involved with his kids in a way that was not so common maybe for a man of his era, but we were all really lucky. And one of the top reasons we were so lucky was their singular focus on learning, reading to their kids, and books. And honestly, in my household growing up, how many hundreds and hundreds of books would have been in that household? I would have no idea. Every room, just stacks and stacks of books. My father, God bless him, he would come home from work and he would stop at the library and just walk in the door with armfuls of books on any subject you can imagine. A big event in our family was going to the annual Friends of the Public Library book sale. That was a family event. The kids all went, and I could buy all the books I wanted for 10 cents or 25 cents or whatever it was. On Sundays, it was always half price, as I recall. That was a major event in our home. So books were a huge, huge presence, but the library was a key focus. And my dad was great about checking out books. He was not so good about returning them. So it was a running joke in our household. This is true. It was a running joke in our household that we would tease him. We'd say, "Dad, someday the library is going to come to the house for you and the books." And one day when I was a young boy, we were having dinner. The whole family was there having dinner, and there was a knock on the door. And this is a true story. There was a knock on the door, and one of my brothers answered it. And when he came back to the table, we could tell something unusual was happening. And my parents said, "Well, Bill, who's at the door?" And Bill said, "It's the library." True story. And so a librarian came into our dining room and looking for the books. And so it was great. My dad sent all the kids scurrying around the house to round up all the books that were overdue, while he, of course, settled up with the librarian for how much we owed. And he said something that he would often say when we would tease him about the fines that we would pay for late library books. He always said, "Money well spent." That was his approach to library fines. I told that story when I gave his eulogy. I told that story. It was that central to our, to our life and to him and to my mom as well. That was just being surrounded by books. And, it didn't just, as an example, my sister, she works just a few blocks from here. She's at the Seattle Public Library. She's devoted her entire career to working in libraries. It's just been passed on to her and to our kids. One of my brothers, his son works in a library, right? That it's not just the impact on the individual kid, but literally can be generations of the impact. That's what you're doing here, Arden, right? It literally has a huge impact going down. And so when I became a father, I was interested, of course, like any parent is how you be a good parent. And I remember thinking about the gazillion books that were always in our house at any moment in time. And I remember Googling, are there any studies about books in a household and literacy or education levels for kids? Not surprisingly, there are studies that show the sheer volume of books in a household directly relate to literacy. The more, the better. Hundreds, all the better. I'm not surprised by that. And so my wife, who is a total neat freak, unlike me, I can be very messy, she indulges stacks of books in our house, when our kids were born. And like any couple, we have a division of labor in our household, like I suppose any couple does. My wife does all the cooking, and I was the reader, so when she was sort of preparing meals, I was the reader. I'm pretty confident that there wasn't a day in our kids' lives when they were little that we weren't reading to them. I think that's probably literally true. I really can't imagine that we ever missed a day. And that continued on through our kids, well into their older years. And, it's interesting, the kids are now 17, and when I text them, they don't respond, right? But I texted them this morning because I said, hey, I'm speaking at this event. And I said, do you guys have any favorite books you guys had as kids? The text responses came back immediately. Immediately. But to your point, you don't forget, right? You don't forget. So they wanted me to pass along. So this is when they were little. I think they thought maybe but when they were a little bit older, a couple they passed along were A Night Divided, which was a book we particularly loved. It's about the Berlin Wall. We talked about that. And The War That Saved My Life. And there was a sequel to The War That Saved My Life as well. The War I Finally Won, maybe. Those were two books when they were a little bit older that they wanted me to pass along to all of you. But it was, obviously we read all the classics. We went through all that. And, it's interesting that, few things make me happier than going into the rooms now, and there's always a stack of books on their nightstand, right? Always. And my son Jack, God bless him, I read to him, I think he was still, don't tell anyone this, but probably not cool, but I think I was still reading to him pretty much every night up to 8th grade. Now look, he's a voracious reader on his own, okay? And the biggest challenge I have as a parent is getting him to close his damn book and do his homework. I'm really not exaggerating, right? But I've just learned to accept that's just who he is. He is just a voracious reader. And look, if that impacts his grades a little bit, I think he's going to be just fine, right? I think he's going to be just fine. And so, books also, I think, for me as a parent, speaking now, was a true window for the opportunity to talk about sometimes complex issues, even at a very young age. Reading books, we could talk about things that weren't so easy to talk about otherwise, but because it was sort of channeling a character or a choice a character had to make about something, was a way we could engage on sometimes complex issues that I think certainly helped me as a parent. So, as I wrap up, one thing I'm acutely aware of is that, not every kid is as lucky as Jack and Katie, right? Not every kid is lucky as I was, right? And my 6 siblings and where we grew up. And that's where the challenge comes in, right? That I think, it was mentioned 1 in 3 kids, right, aren't ready. To me, that is just difficult to wrap my mind around as a parent, but also as a governor. And so that's why I so appreciate the work that all of you do to try to address that disparity, because that disparity can stay with kids for a long time into adulthood. And so from my standpoint, as governor of the state, anything I can do to help all of you in this work I would love to do. I actually had a conversation just recently with former Governor Gary Locke. He happened to be an Olympian. He stopped by, and we had a nice chat. And we actually spent most of our time talking about was this subject. I think when he was governor, apparently, he had some kind of a program where he was involved in getting books into kids. Maybe it was through you guys, maybe it was something else, I'm not quite sure. But he really encouraged me to consider something like that. I had a meeting with my chief of staff this morning and said, hey, well, let's give some thought to something I can do. Every day down in Olympia, kids coming through the Capitol on tours. It seems to be often fourth graders, seems like the level that often is coming through for whatever reason. I've talked to Shane and my team about, hey, maybe there's something we can do in that moment, because I like to just go out there and just crash their tour and just surprise them and talk to them and answer questions, which I like to do. So, hey, is there something we can do? Maybe it's books. Maybe we can work together on, hey, that is something that I can literally hand off to kids who are coming through the state capitol when I have them in a certain moment in time. So, all that is just a long way of saying how much I appreciate all the work that this important organization does. All of you who are donating to this really important organization to make sure we get more books in the hands of more kids, because we know what a difference that can make. And we face many, many challenges as a state. Some of those come from the federal level, but much of those challenges we can address right here in Washington State. We really can. We have that ability to do it, and this is something that I have a deep interest in, and so appreciate the chance to say a few words. Thank you for having my kids respond to my text message right away. That's rare, so I know it's possible, and I just hope you all have a wonderful lunch. Thank you so much, everybody.